if you were eating just fat, you'd be on keto. And I guarantee you, you're not going to be carrying around that excess weight. So it's almost like the extreme where I tell my clients, I'm like, eat fat, stay slim.
Yep.
Like it's to that point where fats are so healthy for us. So anyway, I just wanted to help ease that if somebody's listening to this, especially a woman like me who's like, Caitlin, but if I eat more fat for my brain health, like, am I just going to get fat? No. No, the opposite is true if you do it right.
All right, guys, welcome to the latest podcast. Today I have Kate Bornkamp with me. So, Kate Bornkamp has an interesting story. And as you guys know, sometimes I like to bring experts in who really understand the science of what's going on. And sometimes I like to bring people who have some lived experience because that is really interesting. And I often think it's even more powerful because when you need to solve your own problem, that's when things get really interesting. And now Kate started her career as a certified public accountant, and she spent a decade doing it. And then she realized that she was burning herself out in the big four accounting world and all the hours they're working and all the intensity, and she needed a change. So she became a certified nutritional therapist and also an executive nutritional coach. So welcome to the show, Kate.
Thank you, Brad. Thanks for having me.
You bet. So, talk to us a little bit about your awakening and realizing that the path you were on was not sustainable for you.
Yeah, well, in Big Four public accounting, they will take as much as you're willing to give, and that's well known. It's not a surprise. So, you go into that career knowing that you're going to be working long hours. And I think along the way for me, there was a point in time where I could do both. I could be learning about nutrition. I was really interested in it for my own health journey that I can share more about. And I got to the point where I started to realize that even these really smart people I was working with, like top executives, Fortune 50 companies, really knew little, very, very little about nutrition. They knew very little about their own habits and how that was impacting how they looked, which is what most people care about, but also how do those daily habits impact how you feel and how you perform. And so that's kind of where my gears got turning. And I thought, wow, there are so many people out there who are what I like to call trading your health for your wealth, where you kind of fall into this trap of continuing to do more because you're such a, you're an achiever, you like it. They want to get more done and they're not bringing their health to the top with them. So for me, I think it was deep within my, personal journey when I was in college and I was actually going through a deep place of depression. I was experiencing a lot of body shame, just a lot of shame overall with me not being, living up to my standards. Um, and that came in the form of control over my diet and control over my nutrition. And, when I was left to my own devices, living alone for a little bit, just developed an eating disorder, and it was a very unhealthy place for me mentally. And then I got lucky because at that time I was actually introduced to CrossFit, and I went from wanting to be as small as possible to having a new goal to wanting to be as strong as possible. And so that really totally shifted how I looked at food that I put on my plate, how I looked at my body, and really starting to uncover that what I do on a daily basis, how I move my body in the gym, what I eat, all the other things that we'll chat about, sunlight, of course, how that actually changes not just how I looked, but also how I felt too at the time.
Wow. Yeah. And so it almost sounds like at one point you went from really wanting to um, pour in yourself into like, hey, how do I get as skinny as possible? And then you shifted over into how do I exercise as much as possible? And I imagine the exercise gave you permission to eat more too, which kind of fed off itself as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good call out for sure. That was sort of the next evolution where I kind of assess it as I went from an eating disorder, overcame that, started to become a little bit healthier, but then quickly went into disordered eating, which is exactly that. I was still tracking every calorie I ate. I was tracking every calorie I burned on my little fitness watch, and I was hoping that at the end of the day it would come to as close to zero as possible, which obviously like it doesn't make any sense. And I realized that, yeah, the gym was definitely helpful. Just being a female, like it's really hard to gain muscle. And so it gave me a newfound sense of strength and something more to like constructive that was healthy to focus on. Like, wow, how should I actually move a barbell? Wow, it is good for a female to be able to do a push up and a pull up and like all these things that I hadn't really thought of before. So there was a lot more function that came with it. And I started to understand, in my early 20s, just how important mobility is, which has somewhat served me well, but I definitely that's an area I need to focus on more right now. But yeah, going back to the nutrition piece, that's something that I realized it took me years to get to this point, but I was weighing myself every single day. And I realized that, like, on a quote unquote good day, if the number on the scale went down, I felt good about myself. And then I'd let myself, have a little bit more of the snacks or have like a margarita. And I was like, well, that's not really like a good end result. Like, I'm like giving myself too much leeway almost. But then if the scale was quote unquote a bad day and it went up, half a pound or a pound, I'm like, self-shaming, like, what did I eat? I'm not allowed to eat XYZ anymore. And so I was just like, you know what? Like, the scale is not very healthy for me. It's not serving me and doing anything that's really useful. And so, within the CrossFit space, it's really common for people to do these, like a dunk tank to do your body fat analysis. And so,
Yep.
what that does, it's like an in-body scan if the listeners have ever done that to get your breakdown of your muscle and your fat on your body. But when you do it underneath water, you go into a tank, it's like very accurate. And so that was like a really big eye opener for me because I was like, oh, the number on the scale doesn't really matter. What I want is to lose a little bit of fat, but actually gain muscle. And so it gave me like a new target and a new appreciation to think that no, I don't actually I don't have the overall number go down. I actually want possibly the number to go up on the scale. I just want it to be muscle mass.
Yeah, yeah. Then you start getting into BMI, which is something I've had a terrible hatred for my whole life as someone who's a sinker, as I refer to myself. You can put me in the salty sea and I sink. And so even when I was at my healthiest, I would, they'd give me my BMI and I would be borderline obese. And I'm like, I am not borderline obese. But so we have all these metrics and all these tools out there, and often they do feel like they're kind of a mechanism for shame. So here you were, you went from disordered eating from eating disorder to disordered eating, if you will. And what was the evolution from there to a nutritional coach and a nutritional therapist?
Yeah. So what happened is then shortly after that time, I really started to evolve into a much healthier relationship with food. I started to play around with some supplements. I started to learn about protein. The next big kind of thing that opened my eyes was doing the Whole 30, which is where you eat like super clean for 30 days. And that gave me two big insights. One is, wow, the weight of inflammation on your body, like just the size of what inflammation can look like, because I lost maybe like a pound in those 30 days, but I lost around 12 inches around my body, like around
Wow.
and I'm like, I was still largely the same size I am now. Like, I was not overweight. And I was like, oh my goodness, like just inflammation in my arms and my stomach. And so that was, again, another eye opener where I'm like, I'm trying to get my stomach as flat as possible. Caitlin, I don't need to lose any more weight on the scale. Like, I need to lower inflammation. I need to build muscle. But the second insight doing the Whole 30 gave me was I became really pissed off because it was really hard, if not impossible, to do the Whole 30 and eat out. And I was fortunate, that my girlfriends at the time were trying to schedule lunch. They're like, oh, Caitlin, like, we know you're doing that thing. You get to pick where you want to eat lunch. And, at the time, it was like the only place I could do it was a place that served like a proper entree. And for a girl in her 20s, I mean, I wasn't trying to buy like a steak for myself for lunch. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
But that
totally.
was the only appropriate thing to eat that was even remotely like balanced food or whole food. And so, I was still at the time just plugging away in my corporate career, climbing that corporate ladder, went to college, got the degrees, working my good job. And a couple years later, I had learned a couple things that, really broke my trust, I guess, in our current systems, specifically the healthcare system. And one of those was Dr. Mark Hyman discussing how most medical doctors in the US today get 0 to 1 classes in nutrition training. And I thought to myself, wow, that's wild. I graduated with 2 business degrees and I have one class. I just happened to take a nutrition class. So I have more nutrition training. That was even before I got certified than most doctors in the US. And so, from there, I think experiencing still some depression and wanting to help support my brain health, I was fortunate to get introduced to Dr. Daniel Amen's work. And he was the one that I first heard discuss the idea that, psychiatrists in the United States are one of the only doctors that don't scan the underlying organ that they treat, which is the brain.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh my goodness, that was like a whole nother can of worms for me learning about the connection between my gut health to my brain health to how like to my mood. Like who would have thought that my gut health would have anything to do with how I feel on an emotional basis, you know? And so
A little bit,
go
right?
yeah, so going to the point where I was at my career, in the point in my career where it was kind of this crux because I had always been, well rated, a high performer, decent, good at my job, right? People liked the work I was doing. I was pretty good at the consulting. And I came to a point in my career where it was pretty clear that I needed to either progress or not. And so in Big Four public accounting, it's very common. We call it up or out. Either you go for the next promotion or you don't, and you kind of
That's
leave
corporate
on your own.
America. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so it was pretty clear that, hey, Caitlin, you're up for the next promotion manager. It was laid out for me. Here's what you need to do. Like you need to do your road show. You need to get people behind you because it was a really big promotion to go for the next level. And I was like, okay, so kind of got that information. And I was like, well, I have been thinking about doing this coaching and speaking thing a little bit more seriously. Like at that point in time, I had done some really part-time coaching on the side. I'd done some speaking on nutrition for the teams that I was working with. So, in-house at our firm. And I was like, it's now or never. So I don't have kids yet, let's do it while I'm young. And so that's when I decided to go out into this treacherous road of being an entrepreneur and, starting my own business as Feel Great with Kate.
That's amazing. And so nutrition's an interesting space because you can't go a week without hearing some new advice. Meat's bad, meat's good. Plant's bad, it's got oxalates, plant's good, right? Like there's always a new boogeyman. I was actually, I've like recently I was looking at some labels in the food store, and it's funny that they have the flavor of the day. This isn't a GMO organism.
Hmm.
It says on the pistachio bag. Okay, like so the idea is it's supposed to shortcut our brain marketing and say, oh, this isn't GMO, so it must be good. The next one says, hey, we don't have trans fats in it. Yeah, oh, it's not trans fats, must be good. But like we always find something to demonize. I remember when I was a kid, it was fats were demonized. We had all the non-fat food, and now we're like there's it's a little bit gone rail to rail. Hey, carbs are the enemy and fats are good. Oh wait, not seed oil fat. Oh wait, not. So how do you think about nutrition?
Yeah, I like to first define nutrition as it's beyond just the food that we're eating. It's everything we're putting in, on, and around our body. And how is that actually nourishing our cells and our organs and getting us the results that we want? And I think when we take it into that context of what is the response that it's giving us in our
Yeah.
body, that really puts it into a new light because then you're able to cut through the noise to your point. I mean, there's always different things on labels and um, how is what I'm currently doing today? How is the food I'm eating? How is that serving my goal? How is, the activity that I'm doing or, the oxygen I'm breathing kind of in your world, how is that helping me feel better for my executive meeting on Friday or whatever, whatever you have upcoming or what's relevant in your life, we need to be supporting you for what your body needs because everybody's going to have a different goal. Like for example, like one thing that's really relevant for me right now, again, the story I shared, that was when I was in my early 20s. And now I'm in my 30s and I'm actually, trying to be as fertile as possible. Like I do not want to get below a certain body fat percentage because I want my cycle to be healthy. I want it to be regular. So that's a very different goal than even I had 15 years ago. But in terms of nutrition and cutting through the noise, I mean, yeah, sorry, I just drill it into my clients. Like you want to be anchoring on eating whole food, so single ingredient food most of the time. Like, let's start there. And most of my coaching is what I like to call principle based, not rule based, because we as high achievers and, I like to call myself a recovering perfectionist, we have enough rules for ourselves, right? Like, I can't be too strict with my clients or else they will follow it to a T, because that's what I did. And so, what we need to do is we need to just learn to approach things that from more of like a principle perspective, like, okay, if I can get this right 2 out of 3 times, how will that help me? If I can eat 2 meals a day, that are mostly whole food based with meat, vegetables, fruit, nuts, healthy fats, that's the kind of things I'm talking about, then you're going to be well off, much better off than you would if you're just trying to read every single label. Um, because it becomes almost like a never-ending road of like, well, what about this ingredient? And what about this label? And what do you like for protein bars? And I'm like, hold on, hold on, hold on. I need to teach you how to fish, right? I need to teach you how you should be approaching your nutrition for your goals and what changes you can make in those grocery stores when you're shopping.
Yeah, now I think back to when I was really sick. I was on an incredibly restrictive diet, and this is a decade ago, so there was even less options. So to your point, whenever I had to go out and eat, I was always looking for a place that had a steak because a steak could satiate me and have enough food. But if I went and I got a salad, it might have cheese that I didn't eat at the time, or their salad dressing was junk, or right. So there weren't great options, and so like it was always these few things. Now, when you start talking whole foods and you're talking often made from scratch or single ingredients, and apple's a single ingredient, like you said, nuts are single, and you often deal with really busy executives where time's a premium and they probably don't have time to prepare. Now, maybe they have the means to have someone to prepare it for them in certain cases, but probably not all of them. How do you help them think about that?
Yeah, this is without a doubt like everybody's problem to solve, unfortunately, including my own. Like, believe it or not, I am not a great cook. I don't really like cooking. I like to have my nutrition be as efficient as possible. So I am in the same boat. And yeah, there's a spectrum, I would say, of just depending on like how I talk with my clients is what season are we planning for? Are you like 10 out of 10 busy stress where maybe you should just have your meals prepared either as a delivery service, which is most common for people because it's easier to manage. I've had a few clients that have, the means to do something where somebody's actually preparing for them, but that's the exception. Oftentimes it's a planned strategy between them and maybe their spouse and what will work for their family of identifying how many times a week are we planning to cook. If you don't have time to cook, it simply means you need to cook more per time or have your meals delivered. Like that's kind of the answer here. I have some questions come up where they're like, oh, well, just what about fasting? And I'm like, well, yes, I like fasting. However, if you are in this 10 out of 10 busy and 10 out of 10 stress situation in your life, fasting is not going to help you metabolically, right? And so we get into this like default where we're like, oh, I don't have time to eat. So I'm just going to skip breakfast, drink my coffee, and probably too busy to have lunch because I had client meetings, take over my lunchtime. And then you get to dinner and you're just probably
Voracious.
yes,
Yeah.
and you're just eating anything. And then at that time, you're like rationalizing it to yourself, like, I haven't eaten all day. I can eat whatever I want. And so therein lies the problem with our nutrition. But yeah, I have created a really short 90-minute training that just helps you solve this for yourself. It's called the No Time Nutrition Blueprint. So anybody who wants help with that can get the access to that. It's super easy. But at the end of the day, it comes down to having an intention, like just having a 5-minute planning session for the week ahead. Like, what meals do you need to plan for? Like, what meals are you going to be eating out? I actually think eating out is probably the easiest to solve for. I know a lot of people come to me and their misconception is, well, I'm traveling all the time. My schedule's inconsistent. I'm eating out. How can I possibly eat healthy on the road? And I'm like, I don't know about you, but I have way more healthy options on a menu than I do in my own home. Like, you have so
Yeah.
many more options. Why are we thinking that that's a problem? That's the solution.
Usually the problem with eating out is portion control, I think, is like
Yeah, well,
people.
and there's this like thing that happens in our mind where it clicks. Like if you ever go to like an all-inclusive or if you're ever at like a corporate training and you get access to like a buffet style of food, it's almost like something clicks in your mind where you're on like vacation mode. And so again, you're rationalizing it. You're like, oh, they have pasta here. They have the fettuccine. I haven't had fettuccine in like 5 years. I'm gonna get the fettuccine. It's like, no, what are you doing? Like you're not on an all-inclusive cruise. Just stick to the plan. Just eat the whole food. Pick something with some hopefully meat if you're eating meat, but whole food based. And I have a whole solution on how to read menus for your best benefit.
And I bet you see kind of the same patterns over and over in busy executives as far as some of the challenges they have, don't you?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest one is typically in their mindset of how they're limiting themselves and how hard they think it could be or will be if they choose to change their nutrition, do the things they know they need to be doing. One of the biggest things I see is that a diet insinuates that it will be restrictive. And I mean, I lived that for years. So yeah, like it can definitely be restrictive. And unfortunately, we still live in a diet culture. You're right. I mean, one of the things I would add to the list of what you said earlier is, oh, by the way, like now what about all these GLP-1s? And it's like, should you just take that and be done with it? And that has a whole host of problems. But I empathize with anybody because we're all consumers in this market. And so there are so many mixed messages. But The problem that I generally see most often is they're not able to get themselves to do what they know they should be doing. And they most likely feel like they should be able to do it themselves. So they're less apt to reach out for help, such as a program or a coach. And that is really the biggest hindrance to, an executive or a high performer's health because they've been able to be successful in pretty much every other area of their life. And now it's in a way catching up to them, right? Like the people who are trading their health for their wealth for 1 decade, you can get away with. 2 decades, you'll just, tell yourself you're not in pain or tell yourself that, you'll just burn off those extra 10 pounds. 2, 3 decades, your blood work markers are showing inflammation. Your belly is probably getting a little bit bigger, and you're creating certain metabolic responses in your body that are going to be harder to shift the longer that you continue to live that lifestyle.
Yeah, yeah. Diet culture is a challenge because diet is about it's about foregoing what you want, and the assumption is there's an end date on it. When I was really sick and I decided to make a major diet change, it was cutting out. I always joke it was basically cutting out anything that brought joy to me. But like when I started it, I knew I was like I'll give you an example. I knew I had to get off dairy and I wanted to get off all sugars, including fruits. So every morning I ate a yogurt, And so I was like, okay, week one, I'm just not going to eat yogurt. I can eat anything else. I'm not like restricting just not yogurt, no dairy. And I got off dairy and then and so I started eating sugars. Like I ate a lot of fruits that I normally didn't eat. And then I worried about that in the following weeks. Like, okay, now it's time to take these out. But I knew at the time it wasn't a diet. This is a lifestyle. But the funny thing is, and what people don't realize is so I was on this very restrictive diet for years. And, people, I didn't eat grains and I didn't eat sweets, and people bring cookies to work and, whatever. And they'd be like, how are you not eating cookies? And they were shocked. Like I was just sitting there. I was, not reacting, not like sitting there like, "Ugh." And I was like, look, cows eat grass every day. They eat it. That's their food. I walk by grass every day, and it never makes me salivate because it's not a part of my what I eat. So when I see those cookies, they don't register. I always found the hardest part was eating 1 or 2 cookies. Like if you're in and out of it, especially when you're talking sugar because of how addicting it is, if you're going to eat 1 or 2, then your body starts telling you, oh, I need more of that. I need more of that. And every time you see one, it's going to give you this little dopamine hit. You need to go get one of those. It's going to do this thing to you. But when you just cut something out for a long period and it becomes a lifestyle, and you kind of do what you do, like we all are a creature of complete habits, aren't we?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, it's so interesting. And I mean, a couple things I'll say on that is one, the human brain is wired to respond to pain 10 times more than it responds to pleasure. So if going back to the whole diet thing is if you associate, improving your nutrition with pain, you're going to do everything you can to avoid it for as long as possible.
Yeah.
Which therein lies like some of the tools that I use in my practice with like a metabolic assessment or a blood work assessment. Oftentimes yes, it's helpful for me to know, and I'm going to customize your protocol based on that. However, it's more helpful to create that motivation in their mind of like an external source telling them, like a report that's saying, okay, it is time. It's time to make some changes. But, going back to the whole dopamine thing, I mean, it's so interesting. So I got a dog. He's about to be 18 months and he's like my whole world right now. But in that process, I've been learning how to train him. And, they're really big on like responding immediately to give the cue, like to mark the cue of when he did something good or when he did something bad. And so then you reward it with the treat. And fortunately for me, my dog Maverick, he's very food motivated like the rest of us. So he's really easy to train. But it does make me think about, to your point, when we're reaching for something like a snack or candy, you don't think to yourself, oh, I'm positively reinforcing myself with this candy bar, or that candy jar that's in your office that a lot of my clients tell me about. And one of the interesting things I started doing last summer, I completed an NLP training because I'm really interested in the mind. And NLP is neuro linguistic programming. And so one of those tools is around reassociating something that you currently do or eat. So in this case, I use it with clients on food. A food craving rewiring session takes 10 minutes, super easy. And if they have a food craving that they just can't kick, like to your point, there is a hardwired like hormone response, all these things firing in our brain when we see the candy or when we eat the brownie or whatever it is. And I appreciate now that when people do gravitate towards something like the GLP-1, one of the main benefits people report is it quiets the food noise. Well, please come see me. I will do the food rewiring session for anyone complimentary because it's so easy and effortless in the sense that we have the power within us to associate something like the brownie for me with something unpleasant. So that way you no longer feel like you're tied down by a certain food or like it has a control over you.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting when you start to get hungry. When I first got out of college, I was trying to lose some weight, and so I had gone, calorie restriction, not super calorie restriction, but based on what I normally did. And I always found it interesting when I started to get hungry, you almost get irrational. Your body's like, oh, like is sending you these signals like, I'm gonna die. You need to go get the thing, or you need to go put something in me right now. And I remember like having to tell myself, like having to have this conversation with myself and be like, look, you've got you've got plenty of food in there. Like we're doing all right. You are not gonna die. But it was interesting, like how it would like raise your anxiety level up to like 10 and 11. It's like, oh my God. And you're like, it's so, but it's all just, that's just hormones, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's also habit. It's also your upbringing of like what do you reach for in stressful situations or, what are you accustomed to doing? And I know for me personally, like our family, we're big chocolate lovers. So one habit I had to break years ago was always having dark chocolate or always having chocolate right before bed. And it's just something that we always did. And so another thing I would say is like for me, going back to what you were saying is I love brownies. And I realized pretty early on that the more often I have brownies, the more often I crave brownies. And so now I hardly ever make them just because, I mean, it's not that I don't like them or that I never eat them, but it's too distracting to me. Like it will just re-stir the pot, if you will. And I'm like, I would just prefer not to have that food noise. And I still eat dark chocolate pretty often. So I get my fix in other ways. And now I put like a grass-fed collagen into like a smoothie or like chocolate. So I have learned to kind of soothe that with other healthier options. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think so from my experience of being in a deep place of shame with my body, with my habits. I recognize now that most people, it's not only that they don't always know what to do, because most of us, we know what to do generally. Like I would say 50% of the time, if I was to ask somebody who's really busy and overweight, hey, what is like three things you could do to lose weight and improve your nutrition? They would know. They would already know. They know the
Hmm.
answer. But I have come to such a deep appreciation, not just for what the body is possible, the body is capable of doing, but also how the human mind works. Like the human mind is always doing something for a reason. It's always trying to seek pleasure and avoid pain. It's always trying to be liked instead of disliked by the tribe. And so when you think about things like that, it really puts things in a different light where no, it's not just that people who are metabolically unhealthy are lazy. They're actually probably the opposite. Or it's not just that they don't know what to do because they do. Or it's not that they don't want to. Most people do want to be healthier. Most people do want to do it. They just can't bring themselves to do it and or they feel that deep sense of shame. They're just, kicking themselves every day. It's like re-spraining your ankle trying to run a marathon. It's like that self-shame. I didn't realize how much it was, holding me down. And I'm not perfect. I mean, I still do it in other ways, but I am proud to say that I do it in very little ways around my health than compared to what I used to do.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, we have a lot of folks listening who probably are dealing with chronic health conditions, which naturally causes a lot of inflammation. And oftentimes, inflammation is at the root of not only causing belly fat accumulation, visceral fat accumulation, even more specifically, um, but also it causes psychological triggers in the body, and can affect psychological health, which then causes some more of kind of those bad eating patterns. So talk to us a little bit about the linkages between psychological health and nutrition, and also about inflammation and nutrition.
Yeah, I love this concept because it was a really big unlock for me when I started supporting my own brain health through nutrition. And so, what a lot of people don't realize is, you were saying before that fat was demonized in the 70s and the 80s. Well, one of the main nutrients that our brain needs to optimally function is healthy fats. So, is things like the omega 3s that are anti-inflammatory, fatty sources of meat, like eat the chicken thighs. It's also much more delicious, but like eat the chicken skin, eat the ribeye, grass-fed, hopefully. Like we need to be having high quality sources of fat from nature in order to help our brain not only function better, but I'm talking about the physical structure of the cells in our brain are about 60% fat based. And so you got to think that like taking a step back here, this is a big misconception, just touching on the fat topic for a moment, because it's so relevant for people who do they associate the fat that you might carry around your waist with the fat that I'm talking about eating, and it's actually very different. So majority of the fat that we accumulate on our body, like I'm talking about in your butt, in your thighs, in your waist, all the places you don't want fat, is most likely from you eating too many carbohydrates that then gets metabolized into excess fat and stored as fat in our cells. So I just wanted to make that differentiation very clear because unfortunately they have the same word, and um, they should be thought of as two different things. Like the fat that we eat in our diet, you would have to eat a lot of it. Like if you were eating just fat, you'd be on keto. And I guarantee you're not going to be carrying around that excess weight. So it's almost like the extreme where I tell my clients, I'm like, eat fat, stay slim.
Yep.
Like it's to that point where fats are so healthy for us. So anyway, I just wanted to help ease that if somebody's listening to this, especially a woman like me who's like, Caitlin, but if I eat more fat for my brain health, like, am I just going to get fat? No. No, the opposite is true if you do it right. But there are other things. I mean, definitely things like anti-inflammatory nutrients, like antioxidants. So in really high quality berries. So like think about like the darker color a fruit, a food or a fruit is generally going to come along with different compounds. So like heavy antioxidants and like the dark blue blueberries or the raspberries or the strawberries are going to have some really helpful nutrients in there. But more than that, too, I would say a lot of people like myself need to help heal their gut in order to support brain function.
Yeah.
And there's a two-way communication from our brain to our gut and from our gut to our brain. And so that's a journey I'm still working on is after 15 years of being on the birth control pill, like that definitely wreaked havoc on my gut health and gave me a few nutrient deficiencies along the way.
Mm.
So that's something I'm mindful of in my own journey right now is really trying to help, completely heal my gut, restore my gut microbiome, help replenish the nutritional deficiencies, which I'm almost there. I just have a little bit more to go, but it's an evolving journey, right? I mean, health is never perfect, but we do what we need in any given era of our life.
They call the gut the second brain. A lot of folks don't realize how many neurons are in our gut. I actually think it's the third brain because there's also a lot of neurons in your heart that people don't realize. But that's why I always say, you should trust your gut because your gut actually has a lot of intelligence. And if your gut's telling you something's right or wrong, there's usually a reason. It's responding before that message even gets to your brain, your main brain. So yeah. And it's really interesting. You talk about healing your gut. Early on in my journey, I started to learn about intestinal permeability, which is known also as leaky gut syndrome. That was one of the first things I thought maybe I had, which is part of why I went on this journey of like changing my diet and changing everything in my life and just filtering out anything that brought joy, as I joke. But those are formed by these cells called endothelial cells, which are like gatekeepers. They allow certain things. They allow digested nutrients out and non-digested nutrients to stay in our body or waste. And so sharing that with our audience. So talk to us about what you do to promote gut health.
Yeah, so as an NTP, as a nutritional therapy practitioner, we're trained to support digestion from a north to south process, meaning we need to, if we want to help support our gut health, we really need to be giving, so our gut, small intestine, large intestine, we want to help give it the most digested food possible. So that way it can do its job as easily as possible. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, digestion, a lot of people don't know the process actually starts in your brain. When you start to see or anticipate food, you start to salivate, you start to smell, right? All those things. You walk into a kitchen, you're like, what's that? You're suddenly hungrier than you were 2 minutes ago. Um, and so then we want to be able to chew our food adequately. And then after that, it's up to our body to do its process. And so you want to be able to support it to give your body a chance to produce enough stomach acid And also a big thing that a lot of people don't think about is eating more bitter foods helps your body stimulate and secrete more of these digestive enzymes and stomach acid and bile and all the things that help and are required for adequate nutrition. And so why am I talking about that in the context of gut health? Well, if you don't do those things, if you don't sit down to chew your food, if you don't, eat in a relaxed state and allow your body to secrete enough stomach acid, you're really setting yourself up for a hard time for your body to digest, for your gut to digest that food when it does get to your intestines. And so when we think about what are some of the big things that cause downstream issues, like when we think about the patterns in blood work that are so common, inflammation, high cholesterol, insulin resistance. I mean, undigested food and poor digestion is a huge foundational imbalance that is very, very common. And I know in my own experience, I mean, this took me years to kind of, connect the dots looking back, but I remember when I was early in corporate, it was very common for me to just be walking around with Imodium in my purse. Like I was like, oh, like that's my catch-all. If something goes wrong, I'm just gonna pop an Imodium pill or two.
Right.
And I did that probably at least once a week.
Wow.
I didn't know, like, I didn't know that was a problem. I didn't even know that that wasn't normal. I just thought like, oh, sometimes you get loose stool. And if you do, oh, you just, you just
Right.
have this like convenient tiny little pill to pop and it just plugs you right up. Um, and I'm
Love
remembering now
Western
of,
society, how that works.
yeah, exactly. And, of course, nobody talks about it. And then we all poop shame in the office bathroom where everybody's afraid to poop when everybody's in there. Maybe that's just women. But point being is that when you do make this a lifestyle, so going back to this whole like what we're up against, Brad, as you mentioned, is like, in order to get healthy, do I have to give up everything that gives me joy? No, the opposite is true. When I didn't care about nutrition, when I didn't have my gut healed, I was carrying around Imodium in my purse. I had really bad gas. Like I didn't feel good. I woke up inflamed more often. And so I just want to point that out that when you do start to adopt a healthy lifestyle, even if it is slow, that you will start to have some of these benefits where your digestion normalizes. You are able to heal your gut. You are able to have less inflammation. You won't wake up with your eyes as puffy, right? Like I just find it so interesting in the women's, space with aesthetics and all these things. It's like, oh, if you have dark eyes, do this. I'm like, if you have dark eyes, your liver isn't draining. Like, let's support it from the inside out, dark bags underneath your eyes. Or
Yep.
if you
I
have
know
puffy
exactly.
eyes, you're probably eating something you're inflamed to. And it's like, but nowhere in the aesthetic space are they talking about this internal system. And the skin is such a representation of what's going on inside. So yeah, that was a long way to answer how to support the gut. First and foremost, support digestion. Then also we can incorporate specific gut healing nutrients. So bone broth is a really good one. There's a couple of kind of supplement powders that I really like to use that have really high amounts of glutamate, which again is going to be found in bone broth as well. Marshmallow root, you can take that in capsule form, powder form, or supplement like in tea. So just having some really healing teas to help again, like you said, heal the gut lining, heal that thin layer of gut lining that has been doing its best. Our body works hard for us, and unfortunately, we accost it time and time again, multiple times a day with the things that we put in our body. So some gut healing nutrients is something pretty much everyone can benefit from.
Do you ever focus on talking to folks about their microbiome? Because I know that's like a feedback loop. The things you eat encourage what actually grows or shrinks in the population of your gut bugs. And then those gut bugs need more of the same. And so they trigger. What's incredible to me when you research it is how the microbiome in our gut can actually it can actually trigger our vagus nerve and create hunger cravings and tell us what to eat because we're walking around thinking we've got this autonomy and we're making decisions, and it's hard to believe there's these things that are single-celled organisms that are like pulling on our threads and telling us what to do, but that really does happen. So do you ever talk to folks about the impacts of microbiome?
Totally. Yeah. And I just think it's funny that here we are trying to do our best to be in control of our life and come to find out these these microbiome, the gut bacteria are like controlling everything that you eat. So, jokes on us. But yeah, I mean, definitely gut microbiome is so helpful. A lot of it can be supported through the principle I said before of eating whole foods most of the time. So I like to follow a dip principle. Remember to eat your dip. So doubling up on your protein, increasing your vegetables, and pulling back on the carbs. And that alone, a lot of people don't realize, but why I created that recommendation is because if you eat more of the vegetables, it's going to be feeding healthy gut microbiome. And then you're also pulling back on the carbs, in which case is most often going to be processed carbs. So feeding less of those kind of bad bugs or bugs that feed off sugar cravings. Um, but yeah, we can use some targeted supplements as well to really help get, the balance back. Like, for example, I had a client a couple years ago. She was a woman who, much like me, thought that the indigestion was completely normal. And it really was connected to her, again, to stress, right? Like, people don't realize that when you're stressed, that does change your gut microbiome. And so that can increase, just stress alone has the power to increase bloating, has the power to increase loose stool. And it also has the power to change your gut microbiome. So in that example, I gave her a very specific supplement for probiotic, and that really helped her, obviously in combination with stress resilience tools, to normalize her bowel movements and help ease some of that digestion issue.
And they've shown different microbiomes in folks who have depression, anxiety, or mental health challenges than folks who are healthy. So it's not clear chicken or egg, but it probably becomes a feedback loop, doesn't it?
Yeah, oh, 100%. And I would say that that's something I remind myself of often. I mean, like when I'm having an off day or just experiencing some depression, it's like, okay, Caitlin, it's not that I'm a bad person. It's, how can I empower myself to eat better? Or looking back on, I'm a big retrospective person where I'm like, okay, I don't like how I feel right now. Like, what did I do the last 3 days, or what did I do the last week that led up to this feeling? Because it's all of it. It's definitely microbiome. It's the food you're eating. Um, but yeah, I do think clients are most often surprised by just making a few small changes, like in your diet, in your sleep, and maybe just in your mindset. Like, if you just make a couple small changes in each of those, you will really start to have better energy. Your digestion will normalize. You'll wake up feeling more clear-headed, and it's almost like this weight that you didn't know you were carrying kind of lifts off your shoulders. And again, just kind of normalizing that feeling healthy can feel good. It doesn't have to feel restrictive. It's actually the opposite. I think it's one of the most empowering things that we can do, especially in the day and age where so many of, the older generations, and even some of the younger generations, people in the 20s and 30s, are now becoming more dependent on medications or multiple medications. And so it really is something that I'm deeply passionate about, obviously, but to help people realize that taking care of themselves is one of the best things that they can do to help support and keep their own independence and their own freedom, as well as, I believe, health is our biggest personal development journey that we'll ever go on. And so all of these kind of, glitches or hiccups along the way of, oh my gosh, like, for example, I was presenting to a group of CPAs last Friday, and they were talking about how isn't wine, it's made from grapes, so isn't wine a fruit? It's like we rationalize these things, right? We're like, no, don't take away the wine. And it's like, well, let's approach it from a different perspective. Instead of just nickel and diming everything, like, no, you can't have this, or yes, you can have this. Like, it's not so binary, right? Like,
No.
biology is dynamic. Our bodies are resilient. Okay, so what do we do then? Like, I'm a huge fan of regular and functional testing. So using functional blood work testing at least once a year. For the clients I work with, I typically recommend it once every 3 months. And so that, in combination with the symptom assessment, really gives us a full picture, or a more complete picture, I would say, because there's plenty of other tests that you can run, but it gives us a good picture of, are there any low-hanging fruits of what's out of balance in your body right now? Or maybe you're more solid in your kidney and electrolyte balance, so you're really nailing it on things like that, but maybe your inflammation is really high. And so it gives you like a roadmap. Takes all this noise, like you said, of all the, what did you call it, like a boogeyman before? Of all
Yeah.
the things that are like trying to get you, it's like,
The
what's the new thing
gremlins.
that's, yeah, that's gonna get you. Just focus on what your body needs, and are there any specific areas that your body is kind of lacking in, or that really needs support right now. And then if you do that, it helps support everything else.
So, so much of this is behavioral. I mean, as humans, I don't know if most folks realize how much we do on automated pilot. Um, I drive a manual transmission vehicle because I just like them, and my son's learning to drive, and so I was trying to teach him how to drive. I'm the worst teacher in the world, I realize, because I don't even know what I do. Like, it doesn't ever hit here because I've been doing it for so long, right? And like, that's so much of our life. Everything we do, it's on like this autopilot. And so changing behaviors, I think, is incredibly difficult for folks. I've gone through it myself, and I know I've spoken to many of our customers and clients who've had that challenge. So how do you help these busy executives who probably don't have a whole lot of, free mental space to kind of process, and they've got these pack schedules. And what sort of tools are you giving them to help think about changing their behaviors? And what tools would you recommend for our audience to consider if they're considering a change in their life, whether it's nutritional or some other healthy change they're looking to make?
Yeah, I think a couple things that we definitely use are using a reframe, meaning this concept that we're too busy to do anything else or too busy to add something onto our plate. We start there and identify that one, you always make time for what is a priority in your life. That's just how your mind is wired to work. So you're already doing it. You just need to identify if you need to shift your priorities or not. And a lot of people are kind of stuck in this in between where they think that they want it, they know that they want to improve their nutrition or whatever it is, reduce inflammation, improve their blood work markers, but they haven't made the conscious choice to actually change their priorities. So therefore, how they show up and the actions that they take each day are misaligned, and that creates that internal strife. The other thing I like to use as a reframing tool is Parkinson's law. So if you haven't heard of it, time expands to fill the block in which we allocate to complete the task. So meaning if you give yourself 10 hours to do all of your work or all of your calls, you're going to take 10 hours to complete it. If you give yourself a week to finish that client slide deck or whatever, meeting you have coming up in a week, you're going to take the whole week. So what we can do is use that principle to then, one, reframe how it feels when we're working and how much time we think that it takes for us to do our healthy habits. Meaning, so you could say, like, what's one that I use with people? Okay, so you don't have much time to work out. All right, well, in that case, you only have 20 minutes to move your body today, and that's it. Right. And so automatically your mind is like, well, okay, well, I only get 20 minutes. It's a completely different way than trying to say, where am I going to find 20 more minutes in my day? Like the rest of it will fall into place. Um, those are some of the mindset things. Then some of the tools that I like to do. I mean, the style of coaching that I have found most effective is that I'm not a like dictator in the sense of like, this is Caitlin's diet, this is Caitlin's protocol. I mean, I will give you any information you ask for, of course, but what I'm getting at is that clients have to accept it and sign up to do it.
Yeah,
And
totally.
so that's the nuance of working with a coach is that I think a lot of high performers get this wrong where again they're so used to being self-sufficient where they're like I just need more information. I just need, that one thing. And I'm like, hello, we live in like an unlimited data era. There is so much information out there. Go do it. Go spend hours, which they probably don't have, reading all the information that you think that you need. You don't need more information. You need a
Right.
catalyst. You need somebody. Unfortunately, for 99% of us, this can only happen from somebody else helping us. I mean, there are 1% of us walking around out there who can, make yourself do anything, but most of us are not able to do that. So it really does behoove you to get a coach to help identify what are your blind spots in your mindset, what are your blind spots and where you're currently pushing the pedal too hard. So for example, it's what I like to call the high performer conundrum, where the same things that make you good at your job, being really driven, being a people pleaser even, help you excel in your career, but they're actually hindering your health.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
And
sense.
yeah, and so a lot of the things when it comes down to it, I mean, we can talk different habits and tactics all day, but that's not the problem. I mean, there's hundreds of things that we could do that would all benefit us in many ways, but problem really comes down to, do you feel like it's easier to prioritize somebody else's needs over your own? How long have you been doing that? What
Mm,
results has that created for you? What are the top three things that you know you should be doing that you're not doing because you're spending so much time worrying about everyone else? I mean, these are the real, like when you get to the heart of it, this is what it is the core of it. Another big one I see is even just on, the formality of like investing in like blood work or investing in a coaching program or even investing in something as simple as a supplement. People oftentimes, if you're so used to serving everyone else and being a people pleaser, it can feel weird to invest in yourself.
mm-hmm.
Like I feel guilty about doing something for myself because, my spouse needs help right now. Like, oh no, 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 I couldn't possibly focus on me and my health and improving my habits because somebody else needs something. And so you pretty quickly get down to these like what drives us internally. Um, like I know a big one that drives me, if I'm being honest, is like the fear of being wrong. So I used to think it was a fear of failure, which fortunately I think I've pretty much reframed my fear of failure. I'm like, okay, let's fail all the time, like my new favorite F word, let's just keep failing. But I am still afraid to be wrong. And so what that could look like for somebody else is trying to gather as much information on creating the perfect morning routine or on creating the perfect supplement protocol before you even begin because you want to get it 100% right. And so the mindset, loop that you might be stuck in is if I can't do it 100% right, I don't want to do it at all.
Yep, yep. Perfection, I always say, is the enemy of progress. So I get that. So if people want to learn more about you and what you're doing and get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Yeah, go ahead and listen to the podcast. Feel Great with Kate podcast. It's on all the things on Apple and Spotify. That's where you can find the most up-to-date information and learn some more about how you can apply these tactics to your life.
Awesome, great. Well, hey, I appreciate you coming on and speaking with us today, Kate. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Brad, and thank you so much for everything you're doing.
Thank you. Have a great one.